Chapter 23 of The Virginian. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Virginian by Owen Wister. Chapter 23. Various Points. Love had been snowbound for many weeks. Before this imprisonment its course had run neither smooth nor rough, so far as eye could see. It had run either not at all, or as an undercurrent, deep out of sight. In their rides, in their talks, love had been dumb, as to spoken words at least. For the Virginian had set himself a heavy task of silence and of patience. Then, where winter barred his visits to Bear Creek, and there was for the while no ranch work or responsibility to fill his thoughts and blood with action, he set himself a task much lighter. Often, instead of Shakespeare and fiction, school books lay open on his cabin table, and penmanship and spelling helped the hours to pass. Many sheets of paper did he fill with various exercises, and Mrs. Henry gave him her assistance in advice and corrections. "I shall presently be in love with him myself," she told the Judge, "and it's time for you to become anxious." "I am perfectly safe," he retorted. "There's only one woman for him any more." "She is not good enough for him," declared Mrs. Henry. "But he'll never see that." So the snow fell, the world froze, and the spelling books and exercises went on. But this was not the only case of education which was progressing at the Sunk Creek Ranch while love was snowbound. One morning Scipio Le Moyne entered the Virginian's sitting room, that apartment where Dr. MacBride had wrestled with sin so courageously all night. The Virginian sat at his desk. Open books lay around him. A half-finished piece of writing was beneath his fist. His fingers were coated with ink. Education enveloped him, it may be said. But there was none in his eye. That was upon the window, looking far across the cold plain. The foreman did not move when Scipio came in, and this humorous spirit smiled to himself. "It's Bear Creek he's having a vision of," he concluded. But he knew instantly that this was not so. The Virginian was looking at something real, and Scipio went to the window to see for himself. "Well," he said, having seen, "when is he going to leave us?" The foreman continued looking at two horsemen riding together. Their shapes, small in the distance, showed black against the universal whiteness. "When do you figure he'll leave us?" repeated Scipio. "He," murmured the Virginian, always watching the distant horseman, and again, "he." Scipio sprawled down, familiarly, across a chair. He and the Virginian had come to know each other very well since that first meeting at Medora. They were birds, many of whose feathers were the same, and the Virginian often talked to Scipio without reserve. Consequently, Scipio now understood those two syllables that the Virginian had pronounced precisely as though the sentences which lay between them had been fully expressed. He remarked. "Well, one will be a gain, and the other won't be no loss." "Poor Shorty," said the Virginian. "Poor fool." Scipio was less compassionate. "No," he persisted, "I ain't sorry for him. Any man old enough to have hair on his face ought to see through Trampas." The Virginian looked out of the window again, and watched Shorty and Trampas as they rode in the distance. "Shorty is kind to animals," he said. "He has gentled that hoss Pedro he bought with his first money. Gentled him wonderful. When a man is kind to dumb animals, I always say he has got some good in him." "Yes," Scipio reluctantly admitted. "Yes, but I always did hate a fool." "This hyeh is a mighty cruel country," pursued the Virginian. "To animals, that is. Think of it. Think what we do to hundreds and thousands of little calves. Throw 'em down, brand 'em, cut 'em, earmark 'em, turn 'em loose, and on to the next. It has got to be, of course. But I say this. If a man can go jamming hot irons on to little calves and slicing pieces off 'em with his knife, and live along, keeping a kindness for animals in his heart, he has got some good in him. And that's what Shorty has got. But he is letting Trampas get a hold of him, and both of them will leave us." And the Virginian looked out across the huge winter whiteness again. But the riders had now vanished behind some foothills. Scipio sat silent. He had never put these thoughts about men and animals to himself, and when they were put to him he saw that they were true. "Queer," he observed finally. "What?" "Everything." "Nothing's queer," stated the Virginian, "except marriage and lightning. Them two occurrences can still give me a sensation of surprise." "All the same, it is queer," Scipio insisted. "Well, let her go at me." "Why, Trampas. He done you dirt. You passed that over. You could have fired him, but you let him stay and keep his job. That's goodness. And badness is resultin' from it, straight. Badness right from goodness." "You're off the trail a whole lot," said the Virginian. "Which side am I off, then?" "North, south, east, and west. First point, I didn't expect to do Trampas any good by not killin' him, which I came pretty near doing 3 times. Nor I didn't expect to do Trampas any good by letting him keep his job. But I am foreman of this ranch, and I can sit and tell all men to their face I was above that meanness. Point 2, it ain't any goodness, it is Trampas that badness has resulted from. Put him anywhere and it will be the same. Put him under my eye, and I can follow his moves a little, anyway. You have noticed, maybe, that since you and I run on to that dead Polled Angus cow that was still warm when we got to her, we have found no more cows dead of sudden death. We came mighty close to catching whoever it was that killed that cow and ran her calf off to his own bunch. He wasn't 10 minutes ahead of us. We can prove nothing, and he knows that just as well as we do. But our cows have all quit dying of sudden death, and Trampas, he's getting ready for a change of residence. As soon as all the outfits begin hiring new hands in the spring, Trampas will leave us and take a job with some of them. And maybe our cows'll commence getting killed again, and we'll have to take steps that will be more emphatic, maybe." Scipio meditated. "I wonder what killing a man feels like," he said. "Why, nothing to bother yu' when he'd ought to have been killed. Next point, Trampas, he'll take Shorty with him, which is certainly bad for Shorty. But it's me that has kept Shorty out of harm's way this long. If I'd fired Trampas, he'd have worked Shorty into dissatisfaction that much sooner." Scipio meditated again. "I knowed Trampas would pull his freight," he said, "but I didn't think of Shorty. What makes you think it?" "He asked me for a raise." "He ain't worth the pay he's getting now." "Trampas has told him different." "When a man ain't got no ideas of his own," said Scipio, "he'd ought to be kind o' careful who he borrows 'em from." "That's mighty correct," said the Virginian. "Poor Shorty. He has told me about his life. It is sorrowful. And he will never get wise. It was too late for him to get wise when he was born. Do you know why he's after higher wages? He sends most all his money East." "I don't see what Trampas wants him for," said Scipio. "Oh, a handy tool some day." "Not very handy," said Scipio. "Well, Trampas is aiming to train him. You see, supposin' you were figuring to turn professional thief, you'd be looking around for a nice young trustful accomplice to take all the punishment and let you take the rest." "No such thing!" cried Scipio, angrily. "I'm no shirker." And then, perceiving the Virginian's expression, he broke out laughing. "Well," he exclaimed, "you fooled me that time." "Looks that way. But I do mean it about Trampas." Presently Scipio rose, and noticed the half-finished exercise upon the Virginian's desk. "Trampas is a rolling stone," he said. "A rolling piece of mud," corrected the Virginian. "Mud, that's right. I'm a rolling stone. Sometimes I'd most like to quit bein'." "That's easy done," said the Virginian. "No doubt, when you've found the moss you want to